Howdy, why, hello. Hope you're all doing well. Although I suppose if you're seeing this, you're probably watching the VoD or the uploaded video. Let me just quickly write this out. Alright. Let me see, I'll start a bit later, I guess, and a bit with reading. Let me just see, try and pick out some good stuff. Honestly, all of these are decent stories, so I think I'll just go in order that's in the collection. Why not? Hello, amusing nut. How are ya? Thank ya. Was feeling cozy and comfy. Hope you're doing well. Just waiting a bit before I get started on reading. I don't really have that, these are just really short little bedtime stories. But I'm good. Doing quite alright. Glad to hear you're doing well. Let me actually quickly skim through a couple of these short stories real quick. They look fine. That one by the same author a bit ago, but that one was a bit, well, and I suppose, let me just start on one. Doesn't really matter, they're very short. None, not really stories that connect to each other. So alright, daily up. Wait, what? No clue. Let me just... Daniel Duck was a very wise young fellow. He swam about a pond alone, long before his brothers left their mother, and such worms and bugs and things of that sort as he found made all the other young ducks quite green with envy. But one day Daniel Duck almost lost his life by thinking he was so wise, for he was swimming around the pond when he came to the woods where Mr. Fox was hiding back of some bushes. Daniel didn't go near enough for Mr. Fox to catch him, but Mr. Fox could see that he was a nice plum duck, and it made his eyes shine with longing to look at him. Ah me, he sighed as Daniel swam by. If only I knew some wise creature to ask. I'm far too dull to know anything myself. Hello, Chief, how do you do? And when Daniel heard the word wise, he felt sure that meant him, for was not he the wisest duck of his size and age? So he stopped swimming and looked around. Mr. Fox had hidden himself well under the bushes now. Not even the tip of his nose could be seen. He made his voice sound very weak, as if he were a small, very small animal. Who is it that wants to know a wise creature? Asked Daniel Duck. Oh, a poor little animal caught Egypt, answered Mr. Fox, laughing so at his joke that he could hardly speak. I'm very stupid and do not know much, and I have no wise friends. Daniel Duck had never heard of an Egypt, but he had no intention of letting anyone think there was anything he did not know, so he swam nearer and said, Well, I am wise, and if you wish to know anything, ask me. Come out where I can see you, and we can talk to each other better. He was trying all the time to get a glimpse of the new animal, but Mr. Fox was a wise creature himself, and he had no intention of being seen. Oh dear, I should hate to show my miserable little self to such a big fine-looking creature as you are, he said. It is bad enough to have you know I am stupid, but if you will come closer, I will tell you what it is I want to know. Oh, that's nice, Chief. Yeah, I know T. Gustav. He's a nice dude. Daniel Duck by this time was very brave, for what he had he to fear from so small a creature as the Egypt. So he swam right up to the side of the pond, and out bound Mr. Fox, and almost caught him. If Daniel had not used his wings as well as his feet, he would not have escaped, but he was in the pond swimming for dear life. By the time Mr. Fox was in the water, and as the farm was not far off Mr. Fox, decided not to risk his life. When Daniel Duck reached the barnyard, he told all the fowl about a strange animal he had seen caught and eating up, and that, while he had a very weak voice, he was almost as large as Big Rover the dog. Of course, everyone thought Dickie wiser than ever when he told this, but for all that he was very careful not to swim near the woods again, for though he had told the fowl he had seen and eat you up, he was pretty sure in his own mind that he had met Mr. Fox. Telltale Goblin. Let me just jump on into another story. The Telltale Goblin. Once upon a time, there was a little fairy who loved to wander by the river. And as the fairy queen does not like her subjects to go too near the water, the little fairy had to steal away. Always when they held a revel, this little fairy would fly away from the dance and wander down the river to watch the ripple of the water as it flowed over pebbles and stones. Hello, Galaxy Sunrise, and no. Well, Sir Ruff is around sometimes, but no Sir Ruff right now, I don't think. One night, a goblin who always watched the fairies happened to be sitting under a bush and saw the little fairy. "What is she doing here all alone?" he said to himself. "She has run away from her sisters, and I am quite sure the queen does not know where she is. I'll watch her, and if she is up to mischief, I'll tell the queen. Maybe she'll give me a new red coat for telling her." No, Galaxy Sunrise, not quite. Now this little telltale goblin began to watch, and pretty soon he saw a mist rise from the river. Then it looked like foam, all silvery in the moonlight. And then suddenly, as he watched, the goblin saw a handsome youth rise from the river and hold out his arms to the little fairy standing on the bank. "Ah," said the goblin, "she has a lover, has she? Well, I'll tell the queen. I guess these midnight meetings will be stopped, and I am sure now I shall get a new coat for telling." The river youth called to the fairy just then, and the goblin forgot the red coat to watch what happens. "Come, my love," called the white youth. "Take the willow path and you will be safe from the water." The little fairy flew, tree beside the river, and tripped lightly along a slender bow which dipped its tip into the water. When she reached the end, the white youth was there to take her in his arms. He carried her to the middle of the river, where there was a little island, and the watching goblin saw them sit upon the soft green grass in the moonlight, but he could not hear what they said. Oh, no worries, Galaxy, no worries. I'll run and tell our queen and let her catch them, said the goblin, and forgetting that his red coat would be plainly seen in the moonlight, he jumped up and ran along the river bank toward the dell. Oh, oh, cried the little fairy with alarm when she saw the goblin, whatever will become of me? There is a goblin, and I am sure he has seen me, and is going to tell the queen. Oh dear, I shall be banished. The river youth, who really was a river god, reached for a horn of white shell, which hung from his shoulder by a coral chain, and blew a shrill blast, and the goblin fell upon his face on the ground. Arise, called the river god, and tell me where you are going. Oh, your majesty, said the sly little goblin, I was about to go to the fairy queen and tell her one of her fairies was being carried off, but of course I shall not do so now. I see whom she is with. I thought it was old Neptune himself, that he might change her into a mermaid. The river god knew the bad little fellow was telling him a wrong story, but something must be done. So he pretended to believe the goblin and said, Well, now you know the fairy is safe. What can I do for you if you keep our secret? Give me a silver cap, said the goblin quickly. Very well, come here tomorrow night at midnight hour, and you shall have the cap if you have not told the fairy queen what you have seen, said the river god. The goblin promised, and off he ran to his home in the rocks, and the river god took the fairy back to the willow tree. Come tomorrow without your wand, my love, he said. We must not delay now that the goblin has seen us, for he cannot be trusted after he gets the silver cap. The next night the goblin was by the river, waiting when the little fairy arrived. Where is your wand? He asked, for he saw her wand she did not have it. Before she could reply, there was a splash in the middle of the river, and out of the mist and foam the river god lifted his hat and called to the fairy. At the same time he held up a little silver cap to the goblin. The little fairy went to her lover by the same path as before, but she took from his hand the little silver cap and tossed it to the goblin before she flew into her lover's outstretched arms. Now tell him where your wand is, said the river god. I have left it behind me in the dell, she said, blushing and hanging her head. What, are you not going back to the queen? Asked the goblin in astonishment. Are you to become a river sprite? You have guessed it, said the river god. This night we are to be married at the bottom of the river. Farewell, you little telltale goblin. I hope your silver cap fits your pig little head. The goblin watched the fairy and her lover as they slowly sank from sight. And then he ran off as fast as he could through the dell to tell the queen what he had seen. I'll get a red coat too, he said. I did not promise not to tell tonight. The turtle goblin was so bent on telling the queen what he knew that he quite forgot his new silver cap until he reached the dell where the fairies were dancing. Then throwing away his old cap, he clapped the silver cap on his head so hard he cried out with pain. For a second he saw stars, and the cold silver felt very different from his soft, warm-peaked cap which he had tossed aside. The little fairy, seeing the goblin hopping about in the moonlight, called to the queen, "Oh, look, dear queen, drive away the goblin, he acts quite mad, and may mean mischief." The queen, knowing that goblins, when they were quite sane, were not friendly to her fairies, held up her wand and cast a ray of light straight into the goblin's eye. "Leave our dell," she said, "or something will happen to you that you will not like." "Oh, wait, and hear what I have to tell," called the goblin. "I know a secret you must hear." "Oh, don't listen to him, dear queen," said all the little fairies. "'Tis wrong to tell secrets. Go away, we will not listen." But the goblin would not go. He wanted to win a red coat. And he was sure the queen would give it to him for the secret he could tell. "If you will give me a new red coat, I will tell you something about one of your fairies you would like to know," said the goblin. "Oh, what a funny head he has," said the fairy, as the goblin lifted off the silver cap, because it was so uncomfortable. All the fairies began to laugh, and on his head he clapped the cap again to hide his queer peaked head, and again the cap made him see stars until he jumped with pain. "Oh, he is quite mad, you may be sure," said the queen. "I am not mad. Listen, and I will tell you the secret, and you will know that I am very clever to have discovered it," said the goblin. "But first I must know if you will give me the red coat. I shall not tell you if you do not." The telltale goblin did not think for a minute. The queen of the fairies would refuse to pay to hear a secret, and when the queen told him he was bad, mad fellow and to be off, he was quite surprised. "And hello, sensation, hope you're well, and good day, good evening to you." "You will be sorry," the goblin said as he hopped away, and then he thought he would tell it anyway, for what was the use of knowing a secret if you did not surprise others by showing how much you know? Back he ran, but the fairies and their queen put their fingers in their ears and ran away, so they could not hear. The telltale goblin, however, was bound to tell, and he ran until he was near enough to shout. "She is married to a river god, and she left her wand in the dell. They gave me the silver cap, but not a tell." When the queen and the fairies heard this, they stopped, and the goblin thought they wished to hear more. So he went to them and said he would help them hunt for the wand if they could come to the dell. The queen put her finger on her lips to warn the fairies not to speak, and back they went to the dell, following the goblin, who was hopping and jumping along before them. "Here it is," he said, stooping to pick up a little gold wand. "Hold," cried the queen, "do not touch it. I will pick it up, and now that you have told us the secret, you shall have your reward." The goblin hopped with delight, for he was sure the queen would touch him with a wand and he would have a new red coat at once. "You shall wear the silver cap the rest of your life," she said, and before the goblin could jump away, the queen tapped him on the head, and in place of the telltale goblin there stood a silver thistle, all prickly and shining among the leaves and bushes. "Your sister has left us, and we must forget her," said the queen as the fairies followed her home. "Let her be forgotten by you all, her one shall be saved for a more worthy sister." The little fairy never regretted marrying her river god, for she lived happily ever after, and sometimes when they come up from the river bottom to sit in the moonlight, she will say to the river god, "What do you suppose became of the goblin? Do you think he ever told the queen?" "Of course he did," replied the river god. He ran as fast as he could to the queen, but the silver cap was so uncomfortable for him to wear that I am sure he has discarded it long before this, so he gained nothing for playing the spy. "Perhaps his conscience pricked him and he is sorry," said the little fairy. The little fairy was right. The goblin was sorry when it was too late, and the silver thistle swayed in the breeze. It tried to tell the breeze it was sorry for telling tales, but even the breeze did not wish to listen to a prickly thistle. So there it had to bloom unloved and alone the rest of its life. And hello, Misty Kills. Thank you for the follower. Much love to you. Alright, just taking a quick breather in between stories. Let me just readjust my chair real quick. There we go. And alright, let me keep on going through some bedtime stories in a sec. Hold on. Dame Cricket Show story. Dame Cricket. "Come, children, it's time to get up," said Dame Cricket to her 10 little crickets. "Hurry now and take your bath and put on your little black caps and your little brown suits. The sun has almost gone down over the hill, and the birds will soon be asleep." But the little crickets snuggled under the bath-clothes, just as if they did not hear their mother's words. "Come, come," she said a few minutes later, "you will sleep all night if you don't hurry. Some of our cousins are already singing, and it will soon be dark." "Oh dear, why do we have to get up?" said one little cricket, poking his head over the clothes. Lots of bugs sleep all night. Yes, but they are up all the daytime, answered Dame Cricket, and they run a great risk, I can assure you. My dear, our family used to sing in the daytime, but if we had kept on there, would be no cricket family. There is a reason for our sleeping days and singing at night. Oh, mother, is it a story? Asked all the crickets, jumping out of bed with a bound and gathering about her mother. And hello, Faith. Thank you for the follow. Hope you're well. Yes, there is a story about our family, and if you will hurry and dress, I will tell it to you, she said. Very quietly all the crickets began to dress, and their mother began the story. Once long, long ago, our family sang in the daytime and slept at night. But one day the great-grandfather Cricket noticed that their singing was not as loud as usual, so he called all the children, big and little, about him and looked at their throats. Let me just tell the story here. Actually, I think it's pretty long. Maybe do that. Strange, strange, he remarked. You have fine-looking throats, as fine as ever crickets had, and yet our singing is very faint. There's not much volume to it, as in the old days. I will call on Dr. Frog this very day, and see what he thinks about it. Dr. Frog thought a while, and then he asked, How many have you in your family now, Mr. Cricket? Great-grandfather caught it all about him and began to count, and to his amazement he found our family was about half the size it should be. Just as I thought, said Dr. Frog, the voices are as good as ever, but there are not so many of you, and of course the singing is not so loud as it was once. Shall I tell you the reason for this? Asked Dr. Frog. Great-grandfather said that was why he called on him, so Dr. Frog told him that the birds were eating our family, and if they kept it up we soon would be out of existence. Horrors, horrors, chirped great-grandfather Cricket. Whatever will we do to preserve the family? Easy enough to do that, said Dr. Frog. Sleep days and sing at night, as our family do. Little chance we would have if we came out and sang in the daytime. So that is the reason we sleep days and sing nights. So the birds and chickens and bug-eating animals cannot catch us. Of course, sometimes they do get a cricket, but there's always one who has stayed out too late or gotten up too early. Usually a very young cricket who thinks he knows more than his mother or father. But a good little crickets who mind and get up when they are called and pretty sure to live to a good old age. When Madam Cricket stopped talking, all the little crickets stood looking at her with a very curious expression on their faces. We are good little crickets, aren't we, Mother? They asked. Of course you are. Here you are all ready to go out and sing in the sun has just dropped behind the hill, she said. And chirp, chirp, chirp they sang as they scampered after their mother out into the night. And thank you, Queer Up, for keeping me hydrated. How do you do? And I'm just kind of thinking right now. Kind of went live because of other stuff, but now I'm kind of like, I could have missing out on other stuff because I went live. Oh well. Don't do less than 2-hour streams, so we're on for a while to come. The playroom wedding. The next story. Let me get into that in a sec. Paper doll had been the maid honor, but she did not at all approve of the match. It will never be a happy marriage, she told Teddy Bear the night at a wedding. Such marriages never are. How I should feel married to a man who wore dresses. Yes, he did look as if he wore a dress, for he was a Japanese gentleman doll, you see, and when he came to the playroom to live, everybody, including French doll Marie, thought he was very queer looking. But after a while they became used to KO. That was his name, and when the little mistress announced that Mary was to marry Takeo, she did not make the least objection. What difference does it make, she said to Frida, the Dutch doll, who lived next to her. I suppose I shall marry someone, and truly I could never live with Jumping Jack. That fellow makes me so nervous. He seems very quiet, said Frida doll, meaning Takeo, and perhaps you can get him to dress in men's clothing after you are married. Yes, he is quiet, and I cannot understand the word he says, so we shall not quarrel, said Mary Doll. And so they were married. Jack in the Box was the minister, because the little mistress thought that he stood better than anyone else. She put a black cape on him and a white collar, and Jack behaved in the most dignified manner. Little paper doll wore a dress that quite outshone the bride's dress, only no one noticed it, but 'twas all lace and the tiny little pink buds caught in the flounces, and she wore a beautiful hat with white feathers. The bride wore a white dress and a long white frill, and there were tiny white flowers all round her head, which held the frill in place. But Takeo was far from looking the bridegroom. To Paper Doll's way of thinking, though Mary Doll gave him no thought at all, for she thought the bride was the important one, and as she told Frida Doll, you have to have a bridegroom to be a bride, of course, but really he is not of any importance that I can see. They had been married a week, and while Mary talked to Takeo, he of course did not take the least notice of what she said. Poor fellow, he cannot understand, said Mary Doll. He won't be any trouble though, because I shall be able to do as I like. He cannot tell me not to. These foreigners, my dear, said Paper Doll, are sometimes unpleasant to live with. I cannot see how you came to marry him. Do make him wear men's clothes. Talking about racist dolls now, eh? Oh, I think he looks quite out of the ordinary, and everyone stares at him when we go out riding in the park with the little mistress, said Mary Doll. As I am friends, you see, we both are foreigners, so that does not matter. And then, dear, Takeo is so comfortable to live with. He is no bother at all. But one night Mary Doll awoke to find her husband quite a different man from what she thought, for beside her sat two little Japanese dolls. When the clock struck 12, Mary Doll called to everyone, "Come quick and see my baby girls." "Oh dear, they look just like Takeo," said Paper Doll. "This place will be filled with foreigners, 'tis too bad." "I shall change their clothes at once," said Mary Doll. And then it was Mary Doll and all the toys got a surprise in their lives, for from the corner where they sat came Takeo, and when he stood in front of his wife he said, "Madame will not change the clothes of her sons." When Mary recovered from her surprise she gasped, "Sons? They are daughters." "They are sons, madam, and sons they will remain," said Takeo, looking at Mary very steadily. "I thought you could not understand or speak our language," said Mary, while all the others stood looking at Takeo in astonishment. "I was made in this country, and so are you, but I was made to represent a Japanese gentleman, and I intend to live the life of one. As for speaking, we Japanese never speak unless we have something to say. I had something to say, and I said it. You heard me, madam. Those children are our sons, and you will not change their clothes." Takeo turned round in a very sedate manner, and returned to his corner and sat down. "I told you I would not turn out well," said Paper Doll to Teddy Bear. "Oh, poor Mary Doll, what a life you will lead." But Mary Doll was still looking at her husband, and she did not hear what Paper Doll said. She was smiling at Takeo. "Such dignity," she whispered to herself, "and how masterful he is. I shall never dare disobey him." "Oh, you little darling boys, how I love you. You are just like your handsome father." And Mary Doll hugged her children to her and began to rock them. "She is crazy," said Teddy Bear. "Mary would never give in if she were in her right mind, I know." "She is in love," said Paper Doll. "She has found a master, and some women love to have a master." "Hello, Cece. How do you do? Hope your stream went well. And welcome, readers, and hey at Chewy, and it is me and Jordy, and Hamelo, and Fenstone Finny, and Daisy. How are y'all? Let me just real quick finish the story. There's like 2 lines left. What a nice message, actually. Ish. Let me quickly finish the story. You women are queer creatures, said Teddy Bear. I shall never understand you. Oh, but you're not supposed to understand us. You're supposed to love us, said Paper Doll. And that's where it leaves off. And well, fair enough. To be fair, I don't understand anyone usually. And hello, Ebony, and hello, Costas. How do you do? Hey, Arasi, how was your stream? Thank you so much for the raid. Hold on. Let me not forget, for anyone that doesn't already, go follow the lovely Rasizi. She's lately started streaming ASMR, and she also does some gaming. Don't really know her schedule, but something like that, I think. That's nice to hear, glad it was. And Ebony and Daisy and Rasizi, thank you for the follow. Good day to you. And let me see, I'm just reading some bedtime stories. They're, well, a bit childish, some of them. They are written for children. Although, honestly, reading more and more lately, children's stories have managed to surprise me a little bit. Some do get a bit extra. Alright, let me jump into the next little short story. Morning Glory. Once upon a time, there was a very little morning glory that grew on the end of a vine, and one day when the wind was blowing, a brisk breeze passed by the little morning glory, making it wish it, too, could go along and see more of the world. Enjoy your lyric. Take care. The big Mother Vine knew what was in the heart of her little glory, so she whispered soft words of love to it, and told the little flower that it must never follow the breeze, for he was a wanderer, and might take it far from its home, where it would be very unhappy and perhaps die out in the cold world. But a silly little morning glory still wanted to leave the big vine, and the next time the breeze came along, it pushed up its head, and the breeze took it off the big vine, and bore it along with it far, far away. Oh, thank you. Hold on, sorry. But by and by the wind grew tired of carrying the little glory, so it dropped it, and when the morning glory looked around, it found 'twas in the midst of big tall trees and rocks and briars. Vainly it tried to crawl along to a tree where it could twine itself round and climb. But 'Twas too small, and then the rain came and made it cold and wet, and even the fickle wind did not come to it again. Then the cold days came, and the poor little Glory grew faded, and had to crawl under the dead leaves for protection. When the summer came again up, came the little Glory, but 'twas a sad little flower. Now it longed to climb, but 'twas too small to do anything but lie on the ground. After a while it grew near to a bush, and put its weak little vine round it, hoping to get off the ground. "What do you mean by trying to cling to me?" said the bush. "I have all I can do to take care of myself." So the poor little morning glory dropped back to the ground. By and by it grew long enough to reach a tree, and slowly it climbed up the big trunk until it came to the branches. "Now I shall be able to see the world," it thought to itself. "This tree is big and will shelter me, and I can climb to the very top." As soon as the big tree saw what was happening, it told the little morning glory. It would not have it climbing about its branches, because it would spoil the leaves. "What are you doing in our woods?" asked the tree. "You should be growing in the garden, or an arbor up the side of some little house. How came you here?" The poor little glory had to tell how it ran away from its mother with the breeze and was left alone in the woods all winter. "Please don't send me back to the ground. I cannot see a thing there, and I am so lonely," pleaded the little morning glory. "I am sorry for you," said the tree, "but I cannot have my leaves spoiled on any account. I'll tell you what I will do, but you must be satisfied and never ask for more liberty. If you do, back you go to the ground." The poor little morning glory was so lonely and sad. It was ready to promise anything to get off the ground. "You should stay where you are, but you cannot grow up any higher. If you do, I shall grow my twigs and leaves about you and crush you," said the tree. So the little morning glory had a promise to stay on the trunk of the tree and never grow any higher, but it sighed for its mother vine, and because it could not climb, never grew any big blossoms, but tiny little flowers which sighed because they could not stretch out their vines and grow. But the tree kept a little glory to its promise, and not a vine could get above the trunk. And then one day, when the days grew cold and the morning glory vine was going to sleep for the winter, the runaway glory was heard to say to the other blossoms, "Children, be careful of the breeze and what he may tell you next summer. I may not be here to care for you, but he will surely come and tempt you to go along with him. He is fickle and will carry you far, far away, and then drop you in a place perhaps worse than this, for we do not belong here, but in a garden with other flowers. I ran away from my mother vine one day, and this is where the breeze left me. So cling cling to the big tree as long as you bloom, for here you are safe at least, even if you do not live and bloom in a garden. And then she went to sleep. Hello, Blue Brummel. How do you do, and thank you for a follow. And alright, that was the end of that story. Let me just take a quick little break. Get some typing, a little random ASMR in between. Horror. Let me jump into the next little story. The Peacock Butterflies. Plain little Miss Butterfly sat on a bush one day when along came Mr. Peacock with a still false breath. "Ho, ho," sighed little Miss Butterfly, "how handsome he is! If only I could have a dress like the collar of Mr. Peacock still, all the other butterflies in the world would envy me. But here am I, only a plain little creature with no collar to boast of, while all my cousins have gorgeously coloured gowns. Oh, how I do wish he would give me 2 feathers from his tail, that I might have them made into a gown." And then this plain little butterfly, because she was so plain and had no beauty to speak about, began to think about handsome Mr. Peacock. "I wonder if he is vain," she said out loud. And hello, shy warrior, how do you do? "Vain, of course he is. There is no one in the world so vain as he," said a bee, who was sipping honey nearby. Miss Butterfly did not ask any questions, and Mr. Bee was too busy to say more. But when he flew away, Miss Butterfly began to think, and the more she thought, the stronger became her intention to fly over to the peacock and speak to him. Over she went, and alighting on a flower near him. "Mr. Peacock," she said, "I wonder you never have wished to see yourself. You are so handsome." "Oh, I have," replied Mr. Peacock. "Often I have gazed into the pond and beheld my handsome self." "Oh, that is not at all what I mean," said Miss Butterfly. "Suppose you were to see the very pattern of your beautiful tail flying all about you, then you could look at your beauty as it really is." "I do not see at all what you mean," said Mr. Peacock, who was not very quick at thinking. "I mean, if you would give me 2 tips from your beautiful tail, I could have a handsomer gown than any other butterfly in the world," said the little flatterer. "And beside that, you would no longer hear the yellow and black and those brown and black butterflies say that they were the handsomest creatures in the garden. I could outshine them all." peacock stood up and strutted about, and all the time little Miss Butterfly flew close to him and flattered him. Oh, how jealous they would be if I had a dress like your beautiful tail, for there are no colours in the world so gorgeous, and they would call me the peacock butterfly. Think of that. I would have the most beautiful butterfly in the world, named for you, Mr. Peacock. Mr. Peacock could not resist this flattery. He told her she could choose the 2 tips she best liked, and have someone to pour them out. I did not take Miss Butterfly a minute to fly to the tree nearby, where Mr. Woodpecker was at work, and ask his help, for she knew he did not bother butterflies. His work was to find small insects. Before the end of the summer, the garden folk saw Miss Butterfly, but not plain little butterfly now, for she wore the most gorgeous gown in the garden, of blue and black, and the next year all the other butterflies were jealous of the peacock butterflies, who wore the handsomest gowns in the world. Mr. Peacock struts more than every time he sees one of the handsome creatures he helped to dress, but no one knows that it was due to the flattery of plain little Miss Butterfly that the family name was created. I must say, I am quite liking the short stories written by this author. I think it's a she, right? I was going to say she's a great author, and a great writer. I'm pretty sure it's probably a she. Abby Phillips Walker. Either back in the day, either that or back in that day and age. He probably got bullied, or he, if it is a he, probably got bullied a lot for that name. But I'm assuming it's a she. But yeah, it's been some lovely little stories in the collections of bedtime stories on there. And hello, I'm in thought. Thank you for the follow, hope you're well. And let me jump on into the next story in the collection. The Revenge of the Gnomes. Sounds riveting. The fairies decided to give a party one night and invited the goblins, but I did not ask the gnomes because I did not think of them. The gnomes live so deep in the earth that the fairies seldom meet them, and so they really forgot and did not in the least intend to slight them. But the gnomes heard the goblins talking about a party one night, and they were very angry because they were not asked also. The woods were very beautiful, and some of the trees were wearing their yet red and yellow leaves, for it was late in the summer, when the moon came out. The green and the red and yellow made a pretty picture, and the fairies were delighted with a setting for their party. The fairy queen had a new carriage made from a petal of a white lily and drawn by two butterflies. The fairies all had new dresses of pink rose petals, and they had the fireflies in all the bushes and trees where they looked like so many tiny electric lights. Their table was spread on a big rock. The rabbits were to wait on the table because their coats were white, and squirrels were to do the cooking in a little hollow. The tablecloth was spun by a spider, and was so beautiful that the queen, when she saw it, thought it was a shame to cover it with dishes, so she had the rabbits put the food on a rock behind a tree and leave the beautiful cloth so the goblins could see it. But when the goblins arrived, they looked at the table with dismay. "Are I not going to have anything to eat?" they asked one another, seating themselves at the table and looking with anxious eye. Not a word did they say to the queen about the beautiful cloth, and she found that it was quite wasted on the greedy little goblins. There were so many goblins, the fairies were obliged to spread a table on the ground for themselves, and when the rabbits appeared with the food, the goblins jumped up and helped themselves before the rabbits could serve them. At last, the queen, seeing that it was of no use to have waiters for the goblins, told the rabbits to put the ice cream and cake and lemonade and all the nice things on the table and let the goblins help themselves. The bad goblins spoiled the beautiful cloth the spider had taken so much trouble to weave. They spilled the lemonade and they crumbled the cake, and the poor queen was in despair. The goblins, not getting the food quick enough to suit them, had climbed on the table, which you remember was spread on a rock. Now this rock did not have any moss on it, and it happened that it was one of the doors to the home of the gnomes. The gnomes are little brown men, and they hide under the leaves and sticks that are so near the color of themselves that they cannot be seen. So they had been watching all that went on at the party, and when they saw the goblins on top of one of their rocks, part of the number hurried into the earth and opened the stone where the goblins were. Some of the goblins were quick enough to escape, but most of them went into the ground and all the cake and candy and ice cream with them. The queen and the fairies jumped up and looked around. Everything was changed, and the fairies shivered as they looked. The trees were brown, the bushes and the leaves were falling from the trees, making the ground look as though it had a brown carpet over it. The air was frosty, and the poor little fairies looked about in amazement at the dreary scene before them. The goblins that escaped were running around and calling on the queen to help them rescue their brothers. "'Tis all your fault," they thought her. "If you had asked the gnomes to your party, this would not have happened. Now you must help us to get our brothers out of the power of those bad gnomes." "What shall I do?" asked the poor queen. She found that her party had been a failure, and thought if she had aught the gnomes, it could not have been worse. Just then the goblin came running toward them. He had been sent by the gnomes. They told him to say that his brothers would all be held prisoners until the fairies sent them all the ice cream they wanted. The fairies and the goblins hurried to the kitchen in the hollow, but 'twas empty. The squirrels and the rabbits had hurried off when they felt the frosty air and saw everything turning brown. "What is to be done?" asked the goblins. "You ought to help us," they told the queen again. "If he had not come to your party, we should not have gotten into trouble." The queen could not resist replying to this remark the second time. "If your brothers and you had not climbed on the table but kept your seats, as well-behaved goblins should, you would not have been in need of help. We must go to work," she said to her fairies. "Fold your wings and pin up your skirts. We must make ice cream for those wicked gnomes." They worked all night, and just before it was light, the goblins carried ice cream in nutshells to the rocks of the gnomes, and by the captured goblins came out and joined their comrades. "We lost our supper," said the goblins to the fairies, "and you should give us our breakfast. We are hungry. If it had not been for your party, we should not have lost our supper." This was more than the poor tired queen and her fairies could bear. They took their wands from under their wings, and waving them, they flew toward the gnomes. Little sparks darted from the wands, and every time a spark touched a goblin, it left a little red mark, and at the same time it pricked them. Such tumbling and scampering you never saw as the goblins tried to get away, and when a goblin that had a red spot on his face meets a fairy, he hides or runs, for he knows that she will point him out as one of the greedy goblins who try to make the fairies cook their breakfast for them. And alright, that's the end of that one. We take a quick, short breather in between. Hold on. Let me see, I don't actually know how late I want to make it today. It is just past midnight here. Can't mess with the sleep schedule too much. But I'll do a couple of more stories. A couple more. And hello, Filippo bro. Hope you're well, and thank you for the follow. And let me just jump into the next story in the collection then. The Little China Shepherdess. On the parlour mantel of a farmhouse stood Little China Shepherdess. In one hand she held a gilt crook, and with the other she shaded her eyes and gazed far away. Probably she was looking for a sheep. Her dress was of red and green, and was trimmed with gilt. Her boots were also gilt. On the other end of the mantel stood a little china flute player. He was dressed in red and white, and his flute was gilt, and his boots were red. He held his flute to his lips in a very jaunty manner, but his eyes were on the little shepherdess. He had been in love with her for a long time, but never a look did she give him. China Cat stood near the flute player, and one day she heard him sigh. Why do you sigh? She asked him. He shook his head but did not answer. I know, said the cat. You are in love with a shepherdess, and she will never look at you. Now let me tell you how to manage. First you must stop looking at her. She knows you are always gazing in her direction. The flute player shook his head again and said, I cannot help looking at her. She is so pretty and I love her so dearly. But you must, said China Cat. There is the flower girl on the center table. Look at her and play your jolliest tune and see what happens. And hello there, just Rick. Thank you for a follow. Hope you're well. Good day to you. So the little flute player took China Cat's advice and began to play a lively air. He smiled at the little flower girl, who smiled in return and made him a curtsy. Then she began to dance, keeping time to his music. The flute player commenced to dance as he played, and China Cat moved her head from side to side. The little shepherdess tapped on the mantle with her gilt boot and looked toward the flute player. But he was gazing at the flower girl, and for the first time she thought him rather good to look at. I cannot see what there is about that flower girl to attract him, said the shepherdess. She hasn't a bit of colour about her. She's as white as a bead of cloth. Even her flowers are white. By and by the little shepherdess began to dance as she moved toward the end of the mantle where the flute player stood. China Cat rubbed against the flute player's leg. Look, she said, but be careful she does not catch you. The shepherdess is coming this way. His heart beat very fast, but he kept on playing and fixed his eyes on the little flower girl. But the shepherdess did not come any nearer than the middle of the mantle, and not once did she look at him. By and by it was dark, and the flute player could not see the flower girl, so he stopped playing and his heart was heavy again. China Cat, however, was bound to make a match between the shepherdess and the flute player, and she walked over to the little shepherdess and asked, Don't you think that he plays well? Who? Asked the little shepherdess. The handsome flute player, said China Cat. Oh, I have not thought much about it, answered the shepherdess. Wouldn't you like to hear him play again? Said China Cat. It would cheer us up. The room is so dark. Just then the moonlight streamed in the window and lighted the room. The little shepherdess looked into the distance again and said she thought it would be nice to hear the music. So China Cat trotted over to the flute player. She wants to hear you play, she said, and I think you can win her. The flute player began playing soft music and walking toward the little shepherdess. The music was so sweet and sad that by the time he reached her side, she was wiping her eyes. He stole one arm around her waist and told her not to cry, that he would play a jolly tune for her. No, those are the tunes you play for the flower girl, she said, hanging her head. I do not want you to play them for me. I did not play any tunes for the flower girl, he said. They were all for you. But you looked at her all the time, said the now humble little shepherdess. I was thinking of you, he replied. Let us sit on the end of the mantle, and I will play to you. What would you like to hear? Play something sad, said the little shepherdess. For like all girls, she wanted to cry when she was happiest. There, said the cat, curling herself up for a nap. I am glad that is settled. She never would have given in if he had not looked at the flower girl. These are really, truly, quite queer creatures. China Cat said, closing her eyes. And the little cloudy sheep and after the dream, thank you for the follows, hope you're well. Not much, Arthur. And nice, I'm doing well, how are you? Alright. Think I'll do a couple of more stories, maybe 2 or 3, and then I'll be off to bed for today. Probably. Maybe just try and reach 2 hours uptime. Not too short, not the longest stream. So let me jump into another one. How a buttercup grew yellow. Long, long ago, it is told that the flowers were all white, and that each received its color by some magic power. The little daisy with its yellow eye received its golden center when the angry elves pelted the little fairies with sunbeams. The daisy grew to be very proud of her yellow eye and thought it showed off to perfection that pure white rim. One day she was looking about the field where she grew and saw the little white cups growing all about her in abundance. And I'm just oh, I didn't save the command, hold on. There you go. Saved it this time around. I typed that out but didn't save it apparently. There you go, that last one is the one. Out of those 2, I think I'm currently in the Sandman's Goodnight stories. But I'm not entirely sure. Let me see. Yeah, I am. There is too much white in this field, she told the other daisies. Our beautiful white borders would show off much better if the white cups were golden. But perhaps the white cups do not wish to become golden, said her sisters. Oh, but we do, dear Daisy, said the white cups all in chorus. We have always wanted to be a beautiful yellow, like your eyes, but we thought you would not like to have us that colour, as we have to live in the same field. And hello, Kobe, how do you do? And you're welcome, Miss Pelias. Oh yes, we would, said a daisy, and I am sure the fields will look much more beautiful with you a golden colour than white. Besides that, we shall be seen to better advantage, so both of us will gain by this change. But who will help us to change our colour? Asked the white cups. The daisy thought a long time, and at length she said, You might get the goblins to colour ya, but the thing is to get them to do it. They are such queer little fellows that if they thought they were bothering the fairies, they would do it quick enough. But if we asked them to make you yellow, that we all may look more beautiful, they would only laugh and run off. Why can't we make them think they would make the fairies angry if they made us golden? Asked the white cups. I am sure we can find a way. The daisy thought a long time, and at length she said, oh wait, I already did that. That's why I shouldn't get distracted. And after the proposal by the white cups, the daisies responded, that would be the very thing, but what do you propose to do? We will ask the fairies when they come into the fields tonight for their frolic, said the white cups. The night when the fairies came flying over the field, the white cups called to them and told them what I wanted. Oh, that will be beautiful, said the fairy queen, and we can fool our goblins easy enough, as you shall see. The fairy queen called her fairies round her, and whispered so low that the field flowers could not hear what she said, but I heard the fairies laugh as they flew away, and each alighted on a little white cup and began to sing. We love you, little white cup, our lady in a field. We will watch over you and keep you, and from all danger shield. You are prettier than the daisy with her yellow eyes so bright. You are like a waxen blossom in the pale moonlight. Over and over they sang the verse, as they leaned over and kissed the little cups. And by, from out of the woods came the goblins, hopping and jumping like leaves before the wind. Here they are, they said when they saw the fairies. Listen and hear what they are singing. When they heard the fairies' pretty love song to the little white cup, the goblins kicked up their heels and laughed, each laying a tiny finger beside his nose as he winked at his brother. Off they scampered to the woods again, and the fairies kept on singing their song, while the daisy watched with its yellow eye, wondering how her cousin the white cup would be made the colour for which she had wished. By and by the goblins came back, but this time they carried the bags over their shoulders, and they crept carefully through the grass. The fairies saw them all the time, but of course they pretended not to, and when the goblins were quite near, the queen said, "Come, my children, leave your best loved flower for tonight. Tomorrow you shall come again." As they were flying away, they glanced back, and in the moonlight they saw the goblins hard at work over each little white cup. And when the morning sun awoke, he opened wide his eyes, for all over the field among the daisies he beheld little golden cups, nodding gaily at their cousins with the golden eyes. The next night, when the fairies came flying through the fields, they saw the yellow cups. "You are more beautiful than ever," they said to the golden cups, "and we will call you our golden cups, but you must be known as the buttercups, or the goblins will discover our trick and make you white again." The buttercups thanked the fairies and told them they would be glad to be their cups whenever they gave a banquet, and that never would they let the goblins know the fairies had fooled them. So they bloom among the daisies in the fields, and are called buttercups. But I know, to the fairies, they are the little golden cups, and the goblins wonder why the fairies always seem so happy when they fly in the buttercup and find it changed. The fairies are too wise to let the goblins know how they fooled them, and gained for the buttercups the very colour that they wanted. But it's rather hard sometimes to tell them when the little goblins scamper about and try to upset their plans. The fairy queen has taught them that silence is golden, and they know their queen is always right. Yeah, I don't know. They're just cute little short stories. Been loving the work by this author. Just nice and cute. and alright, let me then scamper on with a story wasn't the field fairy. Jack and his sister Nina were two little orphans who had to beg from door to door for their food and a place to sleep. One day a man named Simon told them if they would work for him, he would give them a home. Jack and Nina thought Simon must be a very kind-hearted man to offer them a home, so they worked just as hard as they could to repay him. But in this they were mistaken, for Simon was a very greedy, hard-hearted man, and only offered to take their children that he might get their work for nothing. Jack did all the chores about the farm, and Nina took care of the house, although they were both much too small to do such hard work. In return, Simon gave them a place to sleep on the floor of the attic and very little to eat. If he had Nina cook meat for his dinner, he would sit by the stove and watch that she did not eat any of it, and when he had eaten all the meat, he would leave the bones and gristle for poor little Jack and Nina, who were half starved. One day Simon told Jack he was going to sell the big brindle cow to the butcher, and that he was to drive her the next day to the town a few miles away. Jack and Nina were very fond of brindle cow, and wept bitterly when they heard this. They begged Simon not to let the butcher have her, but he told them he would not listen to any such silly chatter, and for Jack to be off the next morning bright and early. Nina put her arms around Brindle Cow and cried when Jack was ready to lead her away and watched him down the road, but her tears blinded her so she could not see far, and she went back to get Simon's breakfast with a sad heart. When Jack came to the woods, he led Brindle Cow to a stream to drink, and while he sat on the bank waiting, he was surprised to see a fairy slip out of a lily as it opened. Hello, Marshall Doom, hurry and do, and thank you for a follow. Alright, sorry about a little pause there. When Jack came to the woods, he led Brindle Cow to a stream to drink, and while he sat on the bank waiting, he was surprised to see a fairy slip out of a lily as it opened. I thought you were never coming, said the little creature. Jack thought it was to him she was speaking, and while he tried to find his tongue, which clung to his mouth, he was so surprised Brindle Cow answered. And hello there, Romerick. Thank you for the follow as well. Much love to you. We had to wait for daylight, you know, Brindle Cow said. Yes, I know, but the sun will soon be up, and I must get home before that, said the fairy. Now what can I do for you? Save my life, I'm on the way to the butcher now, replied Brindle Cow. You told me that day I did not eat a field flower, in which you were sleeping, that you would help me if I... No, wait. You had told me that day I did not eat a field flower in which you were sleeping, that you would help me if I ever was in need of help, said Brindle Cow. Last night I saw one of your sisters and told her my sad plight. The field flower fairy would help me if I could only find her, I said. Oh, she will be by the stream in the wood. She sits in a lily until it is time to go home in the morning. I will tell her, she said. And hold on. Of course I will help you, said the field fairy. I will change you into anything you like. What shall it be? There is another thing, good field fairy, said Brindle Cow. This poor boy will be punished if I am not carried to the butcher, and the money he gets carried back to Simon. This boy and his sister have been very kind to me. They never forgot to bring me water, and gave me salt many times, when their master did not know it. I should not like to get them into trouble, even to save my life. Oh, please do not mind us, said Jack, who was at last able to speak. Nina and I will not mind being punished, if only you can escape the butcher. I have thought of a plan, said the fairy, that will save you from the butcher. It will not cause your two friends the least harm either. It is this, instead of changing you into some other shape. Why not change your master into a kind and good man? Oh, that would be best of all, said Jack. That is, if Brindle Cow does not object to remaining a cow. I would rather be a cow if I can be sure I am going to live, replied Brindle Cow. But you can understand, of course, there can be no joy in life for me with a butcher staring me in the face. Well, that is all settled then, replied the fairy. And though the sun is getting well up, I think I can get to your master without letting the old sunman see me, for it is cool and shady along the road to the farm. You two wait here and see what happens. Jack wondered what the field fairy intended to do, but he would not be surprised now at anything, so he began to pick some berries, for he had not had his breakfast, and now Brindle Cow was sure she was not going to the butcher, so she began to eat the sweet grass by the stream. Jack thought she might speak again, and he patted her sides and nose, but the only answer Brindle Cow made was to rub her nose against him and moo. After a while Jack heard someone calling his name, and running down the road, 'twas Nina. "Oh, I am so glad I have found you," she said. "Come quickly, something has happened to Simon." Jack let Brindle Cow take care of herself and hurried after Nina, wondering what the fairy had done to Simon. But it seemed that Simon had brought on his trouble himself by trying to save the wood that morning when Nina told him she needed more wood for the fire. Instead of giving her more wood, he had poured on some oil, and the flame had blazed up and burned them. When Jack and Nina reached the farmhouse, Simon was on the floor, groaning with pain. Forgetting all the unkindness they had received at his hands, Jack and Nina lifted him from the floor and placed him on his bed. Then they did all they could to relieve his sufferings. Nina bathed his face and hands, and Jack bandaged them, and by he fell asleep. When he awoke, he asked for some gruel, and then he remembered Brindle Cow. "Poor creature," said Simon. "I wish I had kept her even if she was getting old, but it's too late now, for of course the butcher has her." Just then the moo-moo was heard outside, and for the first time since he left her at the stream, Jack thought of Brindle Cow. "Why, there she is now," he said. "I did not get to the butcher's this morning because Nina called me before he had gone beyond the woods." "I'll never sell her," said Simon. "Go out, Jack, and give her a good dinner, and tonight see that she has a nice bed of straw in the barn." That day for dinner, Simon told Nina to have a good meat stew, and that Nina and Jack were to eat all they wanted. Jack told Nina what had happened at the stream in the woods, and asked her if she thought the ferry had anything to do with the accident that happened to Simon. "Of course not," said Nina. "Ferries always do good, not bad things, and besides, Simon must have been burned at the very time you saw the ferry, and I wonder if you really did see a ferry after all. Are you sure you did not fall asleep and dream it all?" Jack was quite sure he did not dream it, but never again did Brindle Cow speak. At least, Jack never heard her if she did. But then, when Simon recovered from his burns and was quite well again, something did happen, and whether the field ferry and Brindle Cow had anything to do with it, Jack and Nina never knew. Simon was a changed man, that was sure. He would not let Nina do the work any more, but sent both the children to school. He fixed up the house and bought new furniture, and best of all, he bought nice clothing for Jack and Nina. "And if you don't mind," said Simon to Jack and Nina one day, "I wish you would call me Uncle Simon." He even bought a nice horse and pretty willow carriage for the children to drive to school. In fact, everybody thought Simon must have lost his mind, he was so changed. "It must be the work of the field ferry," said Jack, when he and Nina were talking over what the neighbours said about Simon. "She said she would change him into a kind and good man. Perhaps she came and found him burned and thought she would wait and see what happened to him," said Nina. "But I think you fell asleep that morning, Jack, while you were waiting for Brindle Cow to drink at the stream." Brindle Cow saw the ferry. "Didn't you, Brindle?" asked Jack, as Brindle Cow came up to the stone wall where Jack and Nina stood. Brindle Cow looked over the wall straight at Jack and answered, "Moo." "Does not matter, Jack," said Nina with a laugh, as she patted Brindle Cow on the nose. "This all turned out so well, and Uncle Simon could not be kinder or nicer to us now, if he were our father. Sometimes I think it is all because, when he was so sick and helpless, that we were kind to him, and did all we could, even though he had almost starved us, and made us work so hard. I think he is sorry for it, and is trying to do all he can now to make up for his unkindness and make us forget it." "Perhaps you are right, Nina," said Jack. "So we will forget it, but I am sure about the field ferry and Brindle Cow knows it is true, for 'twas the fairy who saved her from the butcher. But all the answer Jack could get from Brindle Cow was moo. And alright, I think the next story upcoming will probably be the last story for me today. Getting quite sleepy, probably off to bed after. So, get a bit of water. And get started on the frog and the fairies. In a pond in a dell lived a big family of frogs, and one day when the sun was shining, all the young bullfrogs came up out of the water. Oh, Shampai, thank you so much for the raid. How do you do? How did your stream go? And hey, Kimbria. Let me see. And hey, Hazardous, how do you do? Haven't seen you in a bit. And hello, there's Becky and Becky Jade, and you're online. And Martin, how are ya? How are ya? Haven't seen you in a bit either, Martin. How do you do? And hey, Anonymous Toast. Welcome, Raiders, and notice me Shampai. Thank you so much for the raid. How are you? Good day, good evening, good night, whatever it may be. And hello, Sujwe. How was the stream? Good to see you too, Martin. How are you? How are you? I'm good, Hazardous, I'm good. How are you? Oh, thank you, Sujwe. Thank you very much. Glad you like it. That's good to hear, that's nice to hear. Glad to hear it. And let me just give a quick shout out for anyone who doesn't already. Go click that link and click the follow button. Just to make sure. And little Deco, thank you for the follow as well. How do you do? Wait, new emote, what's the... Not in the raid message. What's the new emote? Can someone show me? Stream Elements doesn't have it apparently, at least. Oh, nice, nice. Just relaxing, eh? Just a nice and relaxing day. Sounds good. Got your weekend right, I'm guessing. And hello, you're online. Thank you for a follow. How do you do? Good day, good day. Nice, little deck, nice. And I'm good, I'm good. Just frolicking through some bedtime stories before bedtime. Or well, past bedtime by now, I suppose. It's past midnight, so suppose I'm doing it past bedtime for me. But yeah, been reading some lovely bedtime stories by, if I remember the name out of my head, Abby Phillips Walker. There we go. She has a couple of collection books of just short bedtime stories, and they've been lovely so far. And I just got a sentence or two into a new one, so I'll just restart it in a second. Oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. I think I've yet to catch a stream of yours. Let me check if my notifications are on. My notifications are on. Must have just not been at a good time for me then, either when I was asleep or the like. And well, I get my notifications on my phone. It's also kind of my fault I don't look at that enough. But I hope to be catching a stream of yours soon sometime. Would love that. Oh, and hello, Secret Whispers, how do you do? And thank you, glad you enjoy, and thank you as well, Nourish Me Shampai. And alright, let me moisturize the vocal cords. A new saying I just thought of that. No, maybe not. I don't know, I'll think that one over. And get a reading the next little lovely short story in this collection. The Frogs and the Fairies. In a pond in a dell lived a big family of frogs, and one day when the sun was shining, all the young bullfrogs came up out of the water and hopped on the bank. I think it would be good fun to see what's in the dell beside this pond, said Billy Boo, who was a young and inquisitive frog. What do you fellows say to a lark tonight by the light of the moon? We'll go, Billy Boo, said all the other young frogs in chorus. Better stay home, croaked old Grandfather Bullfrog from his seat on a stump by the edge of the pond. Oh, hear old Grandfather croaking, said Billy Boo. He never went out at his pond in all his days, and what does he know at a dell? Better stay home, crowed Grandfather Frog. Oh, thank you, Anonymous Toast. It's, well, I've also had some comments that the people walking slowly are kinda creepy, but the creepiest part is they vanish in the thin air once the loop goes back around, but you don't see that since they're behind me. You know, I can actually think they just restarted. Alright, sleep well, Nourish Me Shampai. Take care. And yeah, I hope to catch one of your streams sometimes. Would love for that. Need to keep a better eye on my notifications. I must have just completely disregarded it. I don't see it on my phone either. Well, I don't see it on my phone. No higher end than either there. There wasn't anything to either. It's getting late for me as well. Yes, but better stay at home, crowed the Grandfather Frog. Oh, you can, Grandfather Frog, if you like, but we young frogs are going for a lark tonight. And when we come back, we will tell you what it is in the dell, said Billy Boo. That night when the moon was up and shining through the trees, out of the pond leaped all the young froggies. Better stay home, crowed Grandfather Frog from his seat on a stump, but the young froggies only laughed as Grandfather's warning followed them through the dell. Better stay home. This old Grandfather Frog is quite with the time. Better stay home, people. Glad I didn't wait for the vaccines to roll out to read this book. Got to make that little joke. It happened that the fairies were holding a party that night, and when Billy Boo and all the other young frogs hopped and leaped into the middle of the dell, they saw the bright lights of the fireflies as lanterns. Looks to me like all the fireflies in the world had gathered for us to feast on, said Billy Boo. What luck for us. Away off I could still hear Grandfather Frog croaking his warning. Better stay home, better stay home. But it was no warning to the young froggies. They only saw the fireflies and the feast in store for them. The froggies had never seen the fairies before, and they thought they too were little insects, so without stopping to think or look closer, into the midst of the fairy revel, in leaped Billy Bull and all his cousins. But the fairies were as quick as the frogs, and no sooner they leaped than up went all the fairy ones, and there stood each frog still and stiff. They were not able to move, they could only stare and listen. What are these creatures that dare disturb us? Asked the Queen. Your Majesty, they are frogs, said the firefly, and I expect they intended to eat us. Eat the lantern bearers of the fairies, said the Queen. They shall suffer for this. Off with a toe on each front foot, and then perhaps these frogs will stay at home and not hop about at night. Where do they live? Asked the Queen. Sorry for switching sides there. Sometimes I get blindsided by which character is talking, and which one didn't end up talking to another. In the pond at the end of the dell, said the fireflies. Send them home, said the Queen, and every time they wander far from their pond, they shall lose a toe. Down on the foot of the froggies went the fairy ones, and where the frogs had 5 toes, there remained only 4 on each of their front feet, and then with their wands on the heads of the froggies, the fairies turned them round and drove them back to their pond. Better stayed home, better stayed home, crowed their Grandfather Frog, as the young froggies leaped sadly into the pond and buried themselves in the mud at the bottom. And that was the way it is said. Frogs came to have 5 toes on each of their hind feet, and only 4 toes on each of their front feet. If they had listened to their grandfather's warning, they would still have their other toes. And that's lovely. I always love these kind of stories of and that's how these animals came to have this little quirk. I quite some time back read a whole book of short story collections that was all kind of stories like that. I don't quite remember it though, what that one was, but that one was a joy as well. Went into how the armadillo got his skills or something, and a whole lot of things I don't remember, but that was a good collection as well. Maybe I can read that again in a year or so. No one will mind, I hope. And let me get on. I'm getting quite sleepy, but maybe just 2 stories more. Just hope I don't keep saying that too long. Jack the Preacher. One morning in very early springtime, the big evergreen trees began to talk about the part they took in telling all the woodland flowers that was spring. Why, if we were not here, said one evergreen tree, who would awake the sleepy springtime flowers to their duty? I should like you to tell me. You speak truly, brother, said another tree. We are evergreen and need no awakening to our duty, but for us the woods would be a sorry-looking place in the summer. Those lousy crocuses would sleep right on and on. Yes, and little Violet never would dare show their timid little heads, said another evergreen tree. When a soft wind began to run through the woods, it is then we call forth to all sleeping flowers, and shrubs and bushes. Awake, it is time to get up. And who would tell the bee summer was on its way, said another tree. He would never get his work started at all, if it were not for us. How lucky the flowers and all the woodland things are that we are here to tell them when to get up. So the evergreens talked and bragged about how they preached springtime to the woodland folk, and as they talked all the spring flowers awoke, and the insects began lazily to stretch their wings. But it was not because of what the big evergreen trees were saying. No, it was because they had heard the voice of the little woodland preacher. And who was he, do you think? Why, no other than Jack in the pulpit, who gives a talk every spring to our woodland dwellers, and just how to bloom and how to bust and when to do it. Every night, for ever so long before 'tis time for the crocus, or the violet, or an early spring flower to bloom, when 'tis the magic hour the fairies come running through the woods, and touch Jack on his nodding little head under the dry leaves, and up he pops and begins to preach. So when the flowers and bees and things heard the big evergreen trees talking, they nodded to each other and laughed. Isn't it funny to hear them, said a beautiful yellow crocus. Those tall trees know nothing about the real truth of things, do they? Fancy thinking they awaken us, said another flower. Why, they themselves are asleep. They get so used to winter, they stand still all the time. But who is to tell them the truth about their preacher Jack? The evergreen trees never bend or sway to one side or the other far enough to see the beauties of our woodland spring. They only know what the winds tell them. Let them think what they like, said a little bush of pretty blossoms. It does not hurt Jack in the pulpit if the evergreens think they are the preachers of the woods, for all the spring and summer flowers know that Jack has always been our preacher, and the evergreens haven't any pulpit to preach from. Only they do not know it. And so the sleepy old evergreens thought they were the ones who awakened the flowers, and preached to them about their duty, and no one ever told them about little Jack in the pulpit, who always has and always will preach about the spring and summer to all the woodland dwellers. And let me not forget, actually, to anyone who doesn't follow the lovely Kimbrielle yet, go give her a follow as well. And hey, Leo, how do you do? Thank you for the follow. Hope you're well. And let me see. Just go on into the next story. Ooh, it is a long one though. But sure, I think this will be the last one for today for me then. Mr. Crow goes and tells. Mr. Raccoon and Mr. Possum lived near each other in the woods, and one day they decided to give a supper the first bright moonlight night. It will be much easier for us to provide a supper together, said Mr. Coon, because we are bachelors and we can help each other. But the real reason was that Mr. Raccoon knew that Mr. Possum had some new tin spoons, and all the Raccoon family loved shiny things. He thought he might be able to slip one or two tin spoons into his pocket, and never be found out, because there would be so many guests that Mr. Possum would not know which one to suspect when he found it out. Mr. Possum was delighted to do as Mr. Raccoon suggested, and they began making out a list of guests to be invited. Of course it was Mr. Fox and Mr. Squirrel, and Jack Rabbit and Mr. Owl, who were all bachelors like themselves, so they decided they would not ask any of the married folks, but call it a bachelor party. Old James Crow, who lives in a tree near me, will think he should be invited too, I suppose, said Mr. Possum, but he is such a quarrelsome old fellow, I hate to ask him. No, don't ask him, said Mr. Raccoon, thinking of Mr. Possum's new tin spoons, and remembering that the Crow family were very like his own in the matter of liking bright and glittering things. He will never know we have a party. He goes to bed at sunset, you know. Hello, Leo. I don't speak much French, just a little bit. Je parle français petit peu. That's not even correct, I'm pretty sure. Well, I tried. Let's get back to reading. So it was decided that old James Crow was not to be invited, that only the bachelors of the wood were to be asked. A few nights after his moon shone brightly, and over to Mr. Possum's house they all went. Now it happened that they began to sing. When they all sat down to the table, they all were jolly good fellows. And something about being single was a life of bliss, and another about poor married men, and they made as much noise that they awoke old James Crow, who was sound asleep in his bed. Ah, salut, Anonymous. Comment ça va? What is that noise? The Crow said, jumping up and listening, but when he heard it again, old Mr. Crow got out of bed and put his head out of the window. Oh, we are jolly bachelor boys, came from Mr. Possum's house and floated right up to Mr. Crow's window. Something is going on that I do not know about, said old Mr. Crow, pulling in his hat and taking off his nightcap. I must find out what it is. I should say that the noise came from Mr. Possum's house. I'll go right down there and see. And he did, arriving just as the supper was being put on the table, and while Mr. Crow did not go to the door, he had no trouble at all when looking in through the shutters, for old Mr. Crow was very clever in the art of spying. There was a big fat turkey, but Mr. Crow did not care about that. That is, he was not crazy about turkey. He could eat it if there was nothing better, but when the big dish of green corn was brought in, Mr. Crow began to think he had been sighted, and that he should have been asked at a party. Jack Rabbit stood up in his chair so he would be tall enough to be seen, and held up a crisp radish. Here is to our host, Mr. Raccoon and Mr. Possum, he said, taking a bite at a radish. So, thought old Mr. Crow, Mr. Possum is giving this supper, and he's a neighbor. Then somebody began to sing. We are the bachelors of the wood, we wouldn't be married if we could. And then Mr. Crow was good and mad, giving a bachelor party are they, he thought, and they left me out. I am a bachelor just as much as any of these fellows. I'll pay them back for slighting me, if it takes me 100 years. Just then the ice cream was brought in, and Mr. Crow espied the new tin spoons, and his eyes shone with longing to have 1 or 2 or 3 or as many as he could get. But how could he get them? If only he could scare them and make them all run, he would get them easy enough. Then an idea came to Mr. Crow, and he flew away. "I'll have those spoons before I sleep again tonight, and get my revenge too, or my name is not James Crow," he said, and out in the woods he went. Mr. Crow flew straight for Mr. Man's farm, and you know crows can fly very straight, 'tis said. When he arrived, 'twas all still, not a sound he could hear but Mr. Dog breathing very hard. But it was Mr. Dog that Mr. Crow wanted, so it was easy to find him by following the noise. Mr. Crow tapped on the side of Mr. Dog's house, for his door was open, and out bounded Mr. Dog with a growl. "Hush, don't make a noise," said Mr. Crow. "Are you afraid I run over to the woods?" "Yes, I see you are," he said, looking at Mr. Dog's collar and seeing there was no chain fastened to it. "Do you want some fun?" he asked Mr. Dog. Oh, that was still Mr. Crow, never mind. Mr. Dog began to jump about and wag his tail. He was always ready for fun, he told Mr. Crow. "But where is it at this time of night?" he asked. "You come with me," said Mr. Crow, "and if I do not show you more sport in a minute than you've ever had in an hour hunting with Mr. Man, I'll eat all the spoons." "What spoons?" asked Mr. Dog, standing still and dropping his tail. "I don't want to run after spoons." "Oh, I did not mean spoons at all," said Mr. Crow. "I should have said I would eat my hat, but I promise you there will be fun and plenty of it. Mr. Coon and Mr. Possum are giving a supper in the woods, and their guests are Mr. Squirrel." "Tell me no more, I do not care about the guests. Hurry, hurry, where are they?" said Mr. Dog, dancing about so fast that Mr. Crow could not turn quick enough to keep up with him. "Come along and I will show you," he said, and off he flew, keeping close to the ground so Mr. Dog could follow him. The supper was still going on when they arrived. Mr. Crow flew to a tree close by, for he knew Mr. Dog could manage alone, now that he had shown him the place. Mr. Dog did not stop to knock. He bounded in through the window, taking off his collar as he went. Out of the back door, out of the front door, and out of the windows went the guests and their hosts, and after them barking went Mr. Dog. "They are jolly fellows all right now," crowed Mr. Crow as he watched them out of sight. "And now my party begins." Mr. Crow went in and took all the spoons from the deserted supper table and carried them off to his house. He hid them under the bed, and then he got in and went to sleep. He did not even bother to go over to see Mr. Duck the next day, so little did he care how the chase came out. He knew Mr. Dog did not catch Mr. Possum or Mr. Raccoon, because he saw them both the next day, but that was all he knew, and all he cared, for those were the two he had in his plan for revenge. And hello, King Lancerson, how do you do? Good day, and thank you for the follow. The next day, when Mr. Raccoon was out, and Mr. Crow made sure he was not only away from home, but out in the woods, Mr. Crow took all the spoons but one under his wing, and went over to Mr. Raccoon's house, and got in the cellar window. He went upstairs and put those spoons between Mr. Raccoon's feather beds. Mr. Raccoon had 2 feather beds, always having plenty of feathers on hand as he did. Then Mr. Crow went over to Mr. Possum's house, and found him sitting in the doorway, looking very sad. "What seems to be the matter with you, friend Possum?" asked Mr. Crow in the most friendly tone he could master. "Don't you feel well?" "I have lost all my new tin spoons," said Mr. Possum. Someone stole him, I am afraid. He did not want Mr. Crow to know about the party, so he did not tell him any more. That is too bad, said Mr. Crow. Were they anything like those Mr. Raccoon has? I saw him cleaning some very handsome ones this morning as I passed his window. Oh, I did not know he had any spoons, said Mr. Possum. He has never told me he had any tin spoons. Are you sure you saw them? Just as sure as I am that I see you now, Mr. Possum, said Mr. Crow. But of course they would not have anything to do with your spoons. I was wondering if this were like yours. If they are, I could take a look at them, and then if in my travels I saw any like them, I would know they were yours and bring them back to you. I am very clever at finding things that are lost. And hello, Fanny Paul. Thank you for the follow. Hope you're well. Good day. Mr. Possum did not seem inclined to say anything, and Mr. Crow went on. Why don't you come along with me to Mr. Raccoon's house and get him to show us his spoons? I am anxious to help you if I can. I know I should feel if I lost some handsome tin spoons. This seemed to make Mr. Possum interested, so he walked along with Mr. Crow, who was so anxious to get to Mr. Raccoon's he could hardly keep from flying. Mr. Raccoon had just returned when they arrived and was unlocking his door. I lost all my new tin spoons last night, said Mr. Possum. Mr. Crow said he saw you cleaning some, and if they were like mine, he would like to take a look at them, and then he might find mine. But I did not know you had any spoons. Mr. Crow held his head very high and looked sideways while Mr. Possum was talking, but out of the corner of one eye he could see Mr. Raccoon, and he saw him turn around and look at him very angrily. Mr. Crow said I had some tin spoons, he said. He has sharp eyes than I thought, and I always knew he had sharp eyes, particularly for bright things. But how he could see spoons in my house is more than I can explain, for I have no spoons. Well, of course I do not wish to cause any trouble, said Mr. Crow, but I certainly saw you cleaning tin spoons. Anyway, it will be easy to prove you have no spoons in the house by letting us search, and of course you rather would, Mr. Raccoon, for that will clear you from suspicion. That is, if we do not find them. Go ahead and look, said Mr. Raccoon, opening the door and standing aside for them to enter. I'm glad I did not take any one of those spoons, he thought to himself, for he remembered that he had intended to do so if Mr. Dog had not come in so unexpectedly. Of course Mr. Crow held back and let Mr. Possum do all the hunting, until they came to Mr. Raccoon's bathroom, and then he said, I have always heard that stolen goods are often hidden between beds. We might look there first. Of course they found the spoons, and when Mr. Raccoon saw them he almost fell over. Who put them there? I did not, he said. Of course you didn't, said Mr. Crow, with a smile that plainly said, you are a storyteller. There is one spoon missing, said Mr. Possum, who had been counting the spoons. I heard a dozen and there are only 11. He probably ate his breakfast with that one, said Mr. Crow. Better give it up, Mr. Raccoon. We have caught you and there is no use denying it now. Go ahead and find it if you can, said Mr. Raccoon. I did not take those spoons and I do not know where the other spoon is, even if you do, Mr. Crow. What do you mean by that? Asked Mr. Crow, beginning to hop about. I mean that you seem to be pretty sure where those spoons were, said Mr. Raccoon, and if I am not mistaken about the history of your family, they are known for their love of shining things, fully as much as ours. "Come along," said Mr. Crow to Mr. Possum. "We have found your spoons, and that is all I wanted. I cannot bother with this bad fellow, who now wants to make out I took the spoons. But that was always the way with thieves. They blame it on someone else if they can." And hello, Rafał. Thank you for the follow. Hope you're well. Good day, good day. The more Mr. Raccoon thought about those spoons, the more certain he was that Mr. Crow had something to do with their being found in his house. So one night, about a week after, he went to Mr. Crow's house and watched. By and by he saw the light go out, and he thought, after all, he was not to catch Mr. Crow that night. But just as he was going away, he saw a tiny flicker of light at another window. Up went Mr. Raccoon and peeked in. What do you think he saw? Mr. Crow sitting at a table eating bread and milk, with Mr. Possum's missing one spoon. It did not take Mr. Raccoon long to run to Mr. Possum's house and bring him back with him and show him his spoon. And then, right through the window, they jumped and grabbed Mr. Crow by the nape of his neck, and how they did shake the old thief. They did not stop to talk to him. "He's not worth the breath we should waste," said Mr. Coon, "and I feel sure this place is not a place that agrees with Mr. Crow's health. He'll move away, I am sure, where the climate will better agree with him." The next day there was a "To Let" sign on the house where Mr. Crow had once lived, and the bachelors all met that night to discuss the breaking up at a party and to hear about the tin spoons and how they were found. "And 'tis my opinion," said Mr. Raccoon, "that if someone were to ask Mr. Dog, he would tell us that Mr. Crow went and told him about our party." "But who will ask Mr. Dog?" asked Jack Rabbit. No one seemed to be interested enough to ask Mr. Dog, and they never knew for sure whether he told or not. But Mr. Raccoon always said he did. At any rate, the wood folk were rid of old Mr. Crow, and they were glad of it. And all right, with the finishing of that story, let me have a look. I saw someone post over yonder that they were going for a 6-hour stream. That's been longer than I can make my streams lately, so it's formidable to me right now. And I see Emily C. Taylor live and KK Kitty. Oh, Shani doing a charity stream now. Wait, and Riley Rose as well with 12 hours. Guess I have a tough choice to make then. Anyone got any particular suggestions for us where to rage all on over it? Let me see, Riley Rose has 5 hours in a subathon. Well, I'm not sure how much longer she's live for, but that depends on the subathon, eh? And a lovely bedtime ASMR accordingly applied for partner. So that's nice. Could maybe help him, or try and help him with the numbers. It might not be a great. See, I've also heard of Twitch just being like, oh no, you've gotten too many raids. Not getting partnered, mate. I hope that won't happen because, I mean, it's a small raid, so I doubt it would with this raid. But let me know if anyone has a particular preference in where to raid people to. And Game Dev ASMR just went live as well. Guess these are prime time hours for people in Northern America to stream. I am normally not live around this time, but these are all the streamers I usually miss whilst I'm asleep. Right, I don't know. Bedtime ASMR just applied for partner, so let me rate you all over there. Hope it helps. And let me thank you all for having been here today. Take care all. And Gamer Ryan ASMR just went live as well. Apparently this really is prime time hours for the Northern American streamers. Wow. These are all the streams I usually miss, and so I'm usually asleep by this time. But hey, here we go. You all take care, enjoy, and hope you all enjoy Bedtime ASMR, their lovely ASMR as well. I'll see you all some other time. Take care, take care. Until then.